Let us continue with the subject that we interrupted. And please, can somebody help me to read the first two paragraphs? Okay.
Mrs. White's manuscript demonstrates that she made use of the historian works blended together with her unique special perspectives and spiritual lessons, and this makes her books published in 1884 and 1888. Another significant manuscript with 75 pages was written while she was in Europe and can be found in the Great Controversy.
Okay, thank you. So we see here that the Great Controversy is a book compiled not only in a specific place, but some of the visions we are receiving in different places beside United States. So these visions become manuscripts or after articles and completed what after will be the Great Controversy. Without forgetting the historical books that we have mentioned that were added also as information in order to have a better understanding of this particular or specific event mentioned. Let us go to the next paragraph, please. Somebody can read it. That was not read until now. Yes, brother. Only the third one, please.
As soon as she arrived in Europe in 1885, she was asked to prepare a volume for the spiritual thoughts, which presents the possibilities of history. In order to be distributed, this request made her aware of the necessity to present in a broader form a description of the most prominent Europe reformers. With the aid of her literary assistants, she started on this task. She lived in Basel. In Elder Andrew's library, she studied all the histories within her reach.
Thank you. So we are focused now in one of the main sections of the Great Controversy. When you have read the book, you will see that the majority of the historical events presented in the Great Controversy happen in Europe, okay? More than 65% of the content of the book develops the information that happened in Europe. Now, when she was there, she had the opportunity to be in Basel, Switzerland. It's a city there. There was also a publishing house for French and also German and Italian language. And they began to translate different books also, and articles and magazines originally in English to be distributed and to be used for canvassing in this section of Europe. Another one was in England, in the United Kingdom. And now was asking to her from side of the General Conference to polish, to implement, and to enlarge all these scattered articles about the European reform, the Protestant reform. And that was a very proper place where she was in Europe, because she had the opportunity to read and to have contact with the original versions and publications related with this subject. And we see a very important work to enlarge the original information related with the European reform. A subject that needed expansion was the work on Hus and Jerome. Only 3 pages were too short for the European readers. This motivated her to prepare material for this subject. She condensed material from the historian Willie and others, and combined them with commentaries and spiritual lessons. She produced such a long manuscript that it was thought that 2 chapters will have been needed to write about Hus. Now, you see here the different perspective. When the first primary manuscript about the European Reform, Protestant Reform, was published in United States, was good. The people were satisfied. Now, she is in Europe. And then only 2 pages, that was like nothing, okay? So the European division, together with the General Conference, asked for an expansion of it, okay? Because if you publish the Great Controversy in Europe, and they are only 2 pages. For the Protestant Reform, this don't fit with the needs of this continent where the Protestant Reform started and developed, okay? So that was the reason why after this original manuscript about the different reformers was written down, needed to be expanded, needed to be enlarged in order to fulfill the wishes for the people that will receive it, because they canvass with the Great Controversy. That was the idea, because the first version of the Great Controversy was for the world, with pictures, with illustrations, was with this purpose, okay? So in Europe was also with this purpose. And if you mention the history of the church, and for the Protestant church you have only 2 pages, what kind of book is this? Okay, so was needed more information, and she received even more visions. Let us consider about the origin of this Hus manuscript. Somebody please read it for us, the 2 paragraphs. Somebody that was not reading until now.
This manuscript is similar to the one on Luther written 4 or 5 years earlier, except that it shows evidence that it was hastily prepared to satisfy the urgent demand of a more extensive book. The orthography, capital letters, and calligraphy was nearly quite normal. The manuscript was inflated, for as it was said, it was common that she wrote more than enough to make a book. The manuscript was reduced to maintain a necessary balance. The following paragraph as well?
Yes, please.
Because of her many travels, this task was given to Miriam Davis, a very efficient assistant of Ellen G. White. The editorial work, carefully prepared, was examined by its author to establish if the text said exactly what she had written. The changes, if any, she wrote with her own handwriting. Unfortunately, for lack of space, the major part of the added spiritual lessons in relation with us could not be included. This left a plain historical account and a narration of the Great Controversy.
Thank you. So you see here how was this specific case. Okay, originally was a very briefly explanation. Now was needed to enlarge. When different books were consulted and she received even more visions, then was too much at once. And then also they needed to reduce, because otherwise in the context of the completely book will be too much for Luther or too much for Hus. And this will disbalance the content of the book, because Hus was not the only reformator and Luther was also not the only one. So they needed to balance the portion or the content of the information that will be a proportion with the other ones. And we see here that you can find, if you want to have the completely manuscript, I don't remember exactly, but it's not completely, but it's more remain as you have in the Great Controversy. So if you want to have it, you can ask for this by the Ellen G. White trustees. Okay? So, who is going to read for us the first paragraph, please? Yes.
In her introduction to the Great Controversy, we have the words of her son William. My mother wrote very quickly, very early in the morning. She tries to convey on paper the things going on in her mind, as a panoramic view in relation with the movement of nations, communities, churches, and individuals.
Thank you until here. Thank you so much. So this is part of a letter, okay? Besides what we have considered in the introduction of the Great Controversy, we have words in a letter that her own son wrote about this, okay? So, and it's very important to consider this. As we have emphasized already, the Great Controversy is a combination between these panoramic historical visions that she received, confirmed in the Bible and added to the historical sources available at this time. The next paragraph, can you please read it further on for us? Thank you.
Okay, so while writing the books, it was difficult at times to describe the scenes presented to her. When she found a correct representation in the writing of another of what she had been shown, she sometimes copied sentences and paragraphs. She felt she had the perfect right to do so, that it was her privilege to use the correct declarations of other writers to present their thoughts.
Okay, this is a very important element that you need to consider, because people can come to you and tell you, okay, the Great Controversy is a copy of other books and can show you this, okay? And then you remain shocked and you say, what is this? Because I was convinced that the Great Controversy is inspired. How is this possible? And now we have here the information that we have considered until now, different historical books that mention specific details related with speeches of the Reformators were used. And because this corresponds also to the visions that she had received, was added to it. The existing manuscripts show that this procedure was often used in the composition of the Conflict of Ages series, especially in the Great Controversy. We will consider even more in detail, okay? So in the Great Controversy, this was a fact. We have already mentioned 2 booklets. Also, the first one from the OBGYN is not a booklet. This is a lot of volumes. But especially the English version or English selection of the works of the 5 volumes was considered very, very important, especially because of the speeches, and were introduced in the book. We will come in another presentation about the legal regulation of it. We will come to this, okay? So we are concentrated now only in the content, so that we know it will be not a surprise that the Great Controversy is a combination of 3 different sources put it together, okay? Now, we have another one that is Acts of the Apostles, sorry. Acts of the Apostles. And we know that part of the spiritual gifts become also one of the sections of the Acts of the Apostles, but the main section, content of the book Acts of the Apostles have to do with the life and the missionary trips of Paul. This is the major section of this book. And before this book appeared, beside the articles and the manuscripts, like in the Review and Herald, Signs of the Times, and Spiritual Gifts, we find many other little booklets that were after combined with the main content of Acts of the Apostles. So in 1883, it was asked to Sister White, what I repeated, what is here is these articles of her grandson, was asked to her to write a small booklet about only the life of Paul. Because they have prepared a Sabbath school lesson, that was in 1883, only about Paul. and his 3 main missionary trips. So they realized that if they publish this Sabbath school lesson, they have a very good possibility to sell a lot of this book, because the people will be interested to read the book together with the Sabbath school lesson. And because the material was available, a lot of manuscripts and articles. So they suggested to Sister White to put all this together so that a booklet will appear and can be sold together with the Sabbath school. Then she put all this information together and became sketches from the life of Paul. And after, parallel to this, it's interesting, that was another book very well known in the United States. That was The Life and Epistles of St. Paul, written by W.G. Coney Bear and G.C. Homsom, and was an English clergyman. And she read this book. Especially the geographical aspects were very important to establish in the chronological order also how the events happen. Because when you read the Acts of the Apostle, the book in the Bible as it is, not always is completely clear to you when a trip, the first missionary trip began, when ended, when the second began, when the second ended, when the third began, when the third ended, okay? So the idea of the Sabbath school was that everything will be chronological, presented, and studied. And every event for every missionary trip, all the locations, also in the chronological order when Paul visited the places. So then they know, so in the first missionary trip, this and this and this. And this was the route that was in the map. I think you studied already this in the New Testament, right? Okay. And so the second and the third. So she read especially this book that I mentioned to you here, related specifically with the geographical descriptions. Yeah? But it's very interesting that she recommended this to other people. So the point is that generally when you have the purpose to copy somebody or to use the information of somebody, you will never recommend this book, right? Because if you have the purpose deliberated to copy, you will try to hide this, the existence of this book, so that nobody can say, okay, you have copied from him, right? She made the opposite. She even wrote an article and say, I recommended to everyone this book, The Life and Epistle of St. Paul, because correspond very much to the information that she received from the Lord, and correspond very much with the articles and the manuscripts already in existence. Yeah? And not only this, confirm, because she was never in Asia Minor. She was never in Near East. So this book confirmed that the way as she has presented, given by the Lord, is without doubt the right thing, if somebody can have doubts. Because this book confirmed not only the chronological order of the trip, but also the description of the places, the customs of the people living in this area, and also the geographical location of it. Because the archaeology confirmed also that this city was in existence, that the situation was like this at the time when Paul was in this area. So that was a reference and also a recommended book from Sister White himself. So in the Signs of the Times, I have mentioned to you this magazine, she recommended this material. And also another one is a book, The Life and Work of St. Paul. And also is very similar, the section of the biography of Paul, the life of Paul before he became apostle. In this other book was a research, historical and archaeological research, for example, because Paul was well known as Saul of Tarsus. So this book, this last one, The Life and Work of St. Paul, explained very well where was Tarsus, what kind of city were there, what kind of Hebrew community were living in Tarsus, because that was a Roman city, and how was possible for Paul, that he was a pure Jew from mother and father, to become a Roman citizen, okay? And the majority of the Hebrew community from the city of Tarsus were Roman citizens. Why this happened? How was the legal situation of this special city that made so to receive this accreditation from the Roman Empire? Because the Roman Empire was very, very careful to give Roman nationality to somebody that was not a Roman. It was very, very difficult, okay? According to the legal procedure, especially if no mother, no father was a Roman, not even from the ancestry. And in the case of Paul, he was from which tribe? Do you remember which tribe was Paul? Don't tell me you don't know.
Levi.
Oh my.
Oh my.
Better not to say it.
Oh boy.
Benjamin. Yeah, he was from the tribe of Benjamin. And he was able to trace his ancestors from the tribe of Benjamin. So that in this condition, that they were an Orthodox Hebrew family, even have Roman citizenship was not a common thing at this time, especially for Romans. That you remain a Jew with your religion, with your customs, and you become also a Roman. That was something very strange at this time. So, especially in this book, the legal issues, the special accreditation that the Roman Empire gave to this city, and especially to the Hebrew community, is very well explained. And in this context, as a reference, was very important to give a better accreditation and ratification of the information in the book of Sister White. Yeah? Now, when the people hear this, automatically think, yeah, why we say that the books are inspired? Then, when other books from worldly people were considered, were used and studied and even recommended. So what is the difference? Why then the Great Controversy is a great book when used information from other historical books, from people not even from the church, and that have a completely wrong doctrinal idea? How this can be combined, how we can justify these kind of things. Okay? We will try to answer this. And first of all, to understand this, we need to understand how the Bible came for existence. Do you remember when we have studied the Old Testament? Mention to me one book, and I suppose that you know, that is a compilation from reference that maybe are not from the people of God, but are in the Bible. No. Un libro de la Biblia, del Antiguo Testamento, que es compilado y que usa fuentes que no son de origen divino. Okay, I repeat my question. Mention to me at least one book in the Old Testament that is a compilation, okay? And that use historical sources of information outside of the inspiration, and outside of the people of God even. But they are inserted in the Bible. And we don't say, okay, this is not inspired, okay? We say the completely Bible. There are many examples, but mention me at least one.
Chronicles.
Excuse me?
Chronicles.
Articles?
Chronicles.
Chronicles, sorry. Okay, give me a specific example. Also, that is compiled, we know. Different prophets, okay? They say the chronicles of the king so-and-so according to the seer so-and-so. We know these Bible texts. But the point was that is information inserted that are not from the people of God. Yes?
In the book of Daniel.
No, let us remain in Chronicles. Daniel is also another example. We will come to this. Let us think about Chronicles. Brother, you thought about First Chronicles or Second Chronicles?
I'm thinking mostly second.
Second Chronicles, okay, good. Then give us the example. Where do you find, excuse me?
I'm just trying to recall or remember.
Okay, let me help you. One of the times when the Assyrians surrendered Samaria, okay, they sent a representative from the general to speak to the people from the other side of the walls of the city, okay? And Sennacherib, that was the king, but his representative speak to the people in Hebrew language, Aramaic in this case, but similar, and say, you need to surrender the city, because what is this for a God that you have? We already submitted this nation, and this nation, and this nation, and this nation. What makes you believe that your God that is nothing, is not a God, will not come under our power? Do you remember this case? And from the wall, the officers of the king of Israel say, please don't speak that the people understand you. Speak in another language. It's so naive that they told to him this, because he said that so that the people lose the power or the strength to resist the Assyrian power. Okay? Do you remember this case? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So the words of blasphemy, because they were words of blasphemy, from this general toward the God of Israel were not inspired words. Okay? Was not inspired to any prophet, was not given from God to his people, were inspired by the evil one to discourage the people of God. But this is registered. Because if you don't have this, then you don't have the context. Okay? If they omit this, you will not have all the story clear in your mind how this happened. Okay? So you have here one example that is not an inspired source. It's not given by God these words, okay? And it's registered and it's inspired. Why? Because the prophet received it as a command to write down, okay? And then become inspired, but was not given originally to the prophet. And not less from God. Yes, brother?
So you can even think of the dialogue of Satan or Lucifer in the beginning, like him speaking. Right?
Yes.
That is
Yes,
example.
this is another one, yes. Where do you find this?
In Genesis.
Yes, in Genesis 3. You see all this conversation. That was not inspired by God. That Satan say the opposite as God say. Because Eve say, God told us if as we eat from this tree, we surely die. And Satan said, I tell to you, no. You will not die. And you will even become equal to God. And this is the problem why God don't want that you eat from the tree. That was so ridiculous. So then why he put the tree? It's so, but this happened like this, okay? So that was not inspired by God. But this is part of the information. If this is omitted, we will not have the understanding how the things develop, right? We will not have the completely picture that we have now when we read Genesis 3. Okay, you understand the idea? So, the Lord revealed the completely conversation, or we don't know, I correct myself, this conversation, we don't know if that was the completely conversation, but at least the most important elements revealed to Moses that will be right down. But God was not the one saying these things. He was not the one doing these things, okay? So you find in the Bible different examples, also in Daniel. How you find this in Daniel?
I think in the chapter 4 about when the king right, about his spirit.
You find many times different decrees. You have different decrees in the book of Daniel, okay? And that was given by the king. The way how he say is not what corresponds to God's idea, what corresponds to authoritarian king. Because he say if somebody don't respect the king, the God of Daniel and his friends, what will happen to him? He will be killed. His house will be destroyed. Everything will be destroyed by fire. Yeah. God don't want this that will be done to anybody that don't accept him. Not at this time. Okay? So that was the way of thinking of the king. So he tried to express his respect and how he honored the God of Daniel and his friends in the way as he understood reality. Okay? And we have in the Bible. But this is a decree that have the origin in another historical source and is included in the Bible. And everything is under the cover of inspiration. In Ezra, you find the same. In Nehemiah, you find the same. You find the decrees given. Yeah? Was not given by God, the decrees. God helped. And we find in Daniel the fight, yeah, between Gabriel and Satan, that the king of Medo-Persia pronounced and give the decree to set free the people of God, to allow them to go back. That was a fight. Okay? Until Jesus himself needed to come. You find this in Daniel. You remember it? Because you look to me so skeptical, I thought, oh wow, it's the first time. So we have a completely chapter in Daniel that explains this to us. Was a fight that this decree came to existence. Satan wanted to avoid this because he knew people will come back. The temple will be restored. The true worship will be reestablished. And he don't wanted that. In no means. So Gabriel was not enough strong. Jesus himself needed to come and say, finish, until here, no more. Okay, he intervened personally so that the decree will be pronounced. And we will see that after, when you study the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, all the pressure, all the enmity with the Samaritans wrote to the king of Medo-Persia, these people, they will rebel against you. You know the history, how much they rebel against Nebuchadnezzar. And they are building the walls. When they are finished, they will rebel against you. They will not recognize anymore the Medo-Persian Empire. All this tension was going on, even after the first decree. Therefore, we have different decrees. It's not by chance, because the kings didn't have anything others to do but to pronounce decrees. The decrees have to do with the development of the pressure and the enmity toward the people of God at this time, okay? Until the final came, that was also the beginning of the bigger chain of prophecy in the Bible, and Satan knew about this. So he needed to avoid, wanted to avoid with all means that this happened. Because in this prophecy that began with this decree is also the exactly date when Jesus will come. So everything is connected, okay? So when you explain this to the people that object the spirit of prophecy, and consider that in the Bible we have many, not only some, many references to historical documentation and historical references that have not a direct revelation or divine origin. This will help us to understand that these don't decrease or reduce the importance of the spirit of prophecy in the testimonies today. Okay, let me go on with this. This is only one example. We will go through different examples. We will go to the next one. So you will have another homework. Let us go to this second one. We have already considered one related with the great controversy and another one with the life of Paul. Let us consider about the life of Christ. And this is following again the articles that her grandson published, okay, in Signs of the Time. Can please somebody read it to me, the first two paragraphs?
After the publication of The Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 1 in 1870, James and Ellen White turned their attention toward a second book of 400 pages, which would relate the story of the New Testament, the life of Christ and the work of the apostles. A third volume would relate the post-biblical history to the end of time. It was early in 1873, while James and Ellen White were in California for the first time, that she began her writing on the life of Christ. During other meetings held in the Pentalomas Baptist Church, California, she spoke on a Sunday morning about the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness and felt the impact of the subject.
Thank you. So that is the origin of the process that become after the desire of ages. Okay, so we have here a general context of it, and let us continue with this. However, her husband, who had encouraged her to write and had been helping her to prepare the material, became sick from overwork. After a week or so, she decided to face the situation. She will discontinue her writing about the life of Christ until she will acquire the dexterity she needed. In that moment, how could she manage such great and sublime themes? She wrote in her diary, "I am thinking I must lay aside my writing I have taken so much pleasure in, and see if I cannot become a scholar. I am not a grammarian. I will try, if the Lord will help me, at 45 years old, to become a scholar in the science. God will help me. I believe He will." So when she was confronted with this challenge, she felt unworthy, unprepared, and not having enough information, the education needed to do this work, especially because her husband for this period of time was not able to help her. And then she felt very much discouraged and unable to begin something. But the Lord showed her that she had not to depend of other people, because the Lord will provide helper for her, but the message cannot stop, and the truth needs to be communicated, need to be transferred. She had always felt her deficiency in writing, having been to school for only 3 years. A short time before, she had emphasized to her sons the need to be good writers, letter 28. Her books, articles, and manuscripts revealed from the beginning of her work that her writing was clear and impressive, and that her messages showed a distinguished style. Early writings, fruit of her first years, shows a modest vocabulary and a simple sentence structure. Later books and articles revealed a development in literary techniques. This happened after she started helping her husband correcting the Review and Herald and other publications prior to printing. She improved her reading and her relations with other persons on a daily basis and during her journeys. She constantly, as do most writers, think of various subjects and exerted her mind to discover more convincing and better ways to express the truth. So this is a very important element in the personal development of Sister White. And you can do it if you want. It's even recommended that you consider the early writings and you compare with Prophet and Kings, for example, the last work. And you will see how she improved in vocabulary, in expression, in the structure of the sentences, and how she was able to express with even more adjective, with much more extended vocabulary, the visions, the teachings that the Lord gave to her. So she was also in a process of developing, because she received 3 until 4 years education. So this is like extremely basic teaching from school, yeah? How to write, how to read. Excuse me. Thank you. So her husband was a pillar to help her in this, yeah? And especially as her grandson presented to us, her husband and she worked a lot in the first articles, especially the Present Truth after became Review and Herald, and they were alone at the beginning. So they needed to work together a lot with this. So through the corrections that her husband made of her writings, she wanted always to see the corrections. Because she said, if you give me, again, type it everything, and I don't see the mistakes, I probably will have the tendency to repeat it again. But please give me your paper with all the scratches so that I see the correction. So then I realize, okay, I have write down like this, but this is incorrect. So this is the right thing. So that she say, then I fix in my mind, okay, this word I have spelled it is wrong. And the way how I have formulated this sentence is wrong. Need to be like this. And she looked the corrections, okay? So this was a big help in order to improve her way of expression, and especially the vocabulary, the synonyms, the antonyms, and many other adjectives that she needed to add it to her way of expression and presentation of the truth. And this is the reason why you have one article about the life of Christ, for example, childhood, in the Review and Herald, and you have a very similar subject 7 years after, and you say, oh, wow. And maybe it's very similar, the content, but the way how it's presented, you like it even more. And you say, oh, wow, this is nice. It's almost poetry when you read it, okay? And when you compare with this first one, you say, okay, it's good, because you realize it's inspired by the Lord and it's nice, but I like more the other one. This don't mean that one is more important than the other, but that was the improvement in the person herself. And you see this also in the writings, okay? So in December of 1872, some articles had been published in the Review and Herald about the first coming of Christ. Fortunately, even though she felt her incapacity, she did not lose courage, but continued during the next years, and she wrote and published articles about Jesus' life and teachings. This ended in April 1875 with a series about the temptation of Christ. And you have part of this in Select Messages, okay, of this original pamphlet. And especially this pamphlet is very, very important for the nature, the human nature of Christ. So if you want to have the right understanding about this, you need to read this book. The completely title is Redemption or the Temptation of Christ. And she put together the redemption to the temptation of Christ. And many people have the impression this is an irony. How you can put temptation and redemption together when this maybe is, they are antagonic, is a contradiction in itself. No, it's not. If the temptation is resisted. And this is the main focus in this booklet that came as a result of this. And some are in the Desire of Ages, but the majority of this section is in Select Messages, in the section that I recommended you to read it. A year later, writing circumstances became more favorable. Sister White was again on the Pacific coast in her new home in Oakland, California. She had a good helper, Mary Clow, her niece, daughter of her sister Caroline. Mary was an intelligent woman, a Christian who had not accepted the Sabbath. James White was in the east of the country, taking part in the General Conference and attended other duties as president of General Conference. Ellen G. White saw the opportunity to continue with the redaction of the life of Christ and decided, if the Lord did not show her otherwise, to concentrate on that project. So we find here another interesting element. So her niece was not a member of the church. That helped her in this period of time, okay? And she helped her in the redaction, in the proofreading, but didn't have any input or any influence upon the writings. She was working only in this kind of activity. And now we need to close for today and also for this week. So may the Lord help us to have the right understanding how the testimonies came to existence and to realize that are not isolated information from the rest of the historical background in our planet. Is my wish and prayer. Amen.
Amen.
So